week's Courier Mail is reporting, quote, "New tent cities have been set up near some of Brisbane's busiest intersections as Queensland emerges as the epicentre of the housing crisis. The latest tent city to hit Brisbane is at E.E. McCormick Place, where tents can be seen sitting on the edge of a major arterial road, clothes hanging on lines and camp showers draping off trees." That's the end of the quote. Queensland Council of Social Service, QCOS, Chief Executive Amy McVeigh, said the housing crisis was not being properly addressed, going on to say, quote, "It's incredibly heartbreaking but unfortunately pretty predictable that we're continuing to see people, including families with children, who don't have a safe place to call home." End of quote. Now, I've visited tent cities, large tent cities in South Brisbane, on the Brisbane River banks, Mackay and Townsville, and seen smaller tent cities in far too many provincial centres to list. In speaking with those residents, I was horrified to find just how many were with families with children. The really sad part is that mum and dad may both have jobs. Yet without a home for the children, one parent has to give up working to look after their children because a tent is no place for a child. Yet there are children living in tents. Losing that income guarantees that family will remain homeless. Thank you, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The truth is the housing and rent crisis is out of control. In August 2020, the national average rent was $437 a week. It's now $627, an increase of 40% over just a few years. The national rental vacancy is at just 1%, which is far below the 3% rate that's considered a healthy market. In 1987, the average house was 2.8 times the average income. Today, a house is 9.7 times the average income. Additionally, under this government, real wages in Australia have gone backwards 6%. Not only are houses more expensive, working Australians are further away from being able to afford them. Many people under 30 have given up hope of ever owning a home. What a failure of governance under Labor. Surely the prime directive of a government is to leave this beautiful country in a better state than you found it. The reverse is happening. It's worse. Over the past 2 decades, under the Liberal Labor Uniparty, wealth inequality in Australia has increased dramatically and substantially. According to the University of New South Wales, the wealth of the top 20% people increased 82%, and the wealth of the bottom 20% only increased 20%. That, though, does not stop the university grabbing just as much of that wealth for themselves as they can. The university lobby group, Universities Australia, recently sent my office a press release stating they could prove 702,000 foreign students didn't put any strain on the housing market. Actually, they didn't say 702,000. The release rather dishonestly spoke of the 200,000 new students who arrived this year, rather than the total number of foreign students, which is 702,000, all needing a bed and a roof. To achieve this feat of denial, Universities Australia used a simple statistical trick. They used vacancy rate as the indicator instead of rental price. Like any supply and demand industry, rentals price will rise until demand matches supply. This means vacancy rate should be constant across different areas because the balancing factor is not vacancy rate, it's rental price. Rentals are higher near a university as landlords price into their rents the ability to have 3 or 4 students per bedroom. And knowing how those rates are being paid with so many tenants, local councils hike up rates to exploit overcrowding. The national vacancy rate across Australia has fallen from 2.42% in 2021 to 1.09% in January 2024 because of the housing crisis, the housing catastrophe. Why? In part because foreign students all need a bed, and more so because 2 million new arrivals all need a bed. Universities couldn't care less about everyday Australians sleeping in tents in public parks and under bridges. Universities are motivated to grab the money foreign students pay towards obscene multi-million-dollar university salaries. University fees are on average 8 times what they were when the Hawke Labor government reintroduced tertiary fees in 1989. 8 times. I'm pleased to see racketeering in this motion. So many Australian industries are being controlled for the benefit of well-connected, mostly foreign wealth funds, acting against the financial interests of everyday Australians. Racketeering could be a separate inquiry, so entrenched has the practice become. When it comes to ignoring working families, Labor has form. It's clear. The reason I'm raising this in a speech, housing speech, is quite simple. University affordability is no better than it was before HECS, except that now children of everyday Australians are left with a debt so high they can't ever afford their own home. So many young people contact my office, Australians who've done everything society has asked of them. They've studied hard, worked hard, stayed out of trouble, got a university degree and now have a good job, only to find they were lied to. Real wages in Australia are back to 2010 levels, while houses are twice as expensive as they were in 2010. HECS debt comes off the person's ability to repay a loan, which means it reduces their borrowing power below the price of an entry-level home. They can't borrow. Meanwhile, rents are so high they have no ability to even save a deposit. Society is lying to our young Australians. This is not on the Labor Party alone. These problems date back to the Hawke Labor government and were made far worse under the Howard Liberal government, the uni party at work. The message I have for recent graduates is one of hope. One Nation's housing policy looks to the future, offering common-sense solutions to help more Australians purchase their own home, while at the same time reducing rent. Let's have an overview of our housing policy. One Nation's housing policy includes lower immigration to sustainable levels to reduce housing demand. In fact, I go further and say with the 2.3 million people on residence visas, we need to send some home. Secondly, ban foreign ownership of residential property to increase housing supply. Allow a portion of a person's superannuation to be invested in home purchase. Ditch Labor's Housing Future Fund and invest those funds into creating a new People's Mortgage Scheme, offering 5% deposit and 5% interest rate. Allow people with a HECS debt to roll their debt into a People's Mortgage account, improving their ability to obtain and service a loan. This is common sense. It's humane. Implement a 5-year moratorium on charging GST on the materials used in new home construction, which will make new homes more affordable, taking $1.4 billion off the sale price of new homes over the next 4 years. Some more details. Non-bank financial institutions are standing ready right now to take on the mortgage market and administer our people's home loans. They're ready. Indeed, some are in the market now in company with aggregators. It's One Nation policy to create a people's bank to provide Australia's obscenely profitable banking cartel with real competition. We don't have 4 banks, major banks. We have one major bank with 4 different logos with the same controlling interest: BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street and First State. Efficiency in banking, including in the housing market, will not come from more regulation. It will come from more competition, driving real accountability. That's exactly what the original Commonwealth Bank, when it was formed in 1911, did. The cost of building a house now is a massive problem. One of the reasons that cost keeps going up is Australian construction codes. Construction codes are meant to make sure our houses aren't made of straw and won't blow down if the big bad wolf or a cyclone huffs and puffs at all. Unfortunately, Australia's construction codes have gone woke. They're no longer just about safe houses. The National Construction Code was amended in 2022 to require all new buildings to be NDIS compliant. Every single building NDIS compliant. Alan Kohler reports that global construction consultant Ryder Levitt Bucknell estimates that this adds up to $49,500 to the cost of a dwelling. $50,000. Why should a young family have to shell out an extra $50,000 on features they'll never need to buy their family home? Some of the requirements border on ridiculous. There must be a stepless entry to the front door, so the days of steps are over, even a handful up to your front porch. You'll have to pay for a ramp or potentially face having your home deemed illegal. Remember, this applies to every new building. All new homes must be built with heavy-duty reinforced walls and a toilet. These are ostensibly so grab rails can be installed, even though they may never be installed. Oh, and where did you want to put the toilet? You didn't think you could just put it where you wanted and where it's convenient, did you? Considering skipping a toilet on the ground floor and only having one upstairs to save on plumbing? Think again. Construction code says no. You're forced to have one on the ground floor whether it's cost-effective for you or not, whether you need it or not. The codes now dictate where the toilet must be placed, against a wall, and the huge spaces that must be left around them. As the price of land continues to go up, many houses simply don't have the floor space to accommodate these new requirements without sacrificing others. And young people are paying for this, even though they don't need it. No doubt these criteria are helpful for people with a disability, yet there's no reason to make them mandatory in every new house for people without a disability. Many in government claim that when it comes to housing, the problem is supply, when these changes to the construction codes alone are costing an extra $50,000 to a house. There's no hope of boosting supply because Australians can't afford to build. Construction codes are getting so long and complex we practically need to be a lawyer to decipher them. That's no slight on our tradies. Most are far smarter and useful than lawyers anyway. Our tradies should be using their hands on power tools and paintbrushes, not having to turn over pages and pages of regulations telling them how to swing a hammer. And the same applies to our farmers, buried in paperwork. Unions like the CFMEU endorse these complex additions because it means more work for them. Meanwhile, quotes to build a new house leave Australians gobsmacked. The people who can afford these expensive houses are millionaire foreign buyers. There's no doubt that foreigners are buying houses here, and that comes at the expense of an Australian who can't get into a house. Where are the Labor government's union mates when it comes to the issue of foreign buyers? They're completely silent. Completely silent. The government calls it foreign investment. Wrong, it's not investment.